Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome OpenDaylight Executive Director, Neela Jacques.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, come on, let's try that again. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, I hear this is a passionate community, so please don't let me down.
It's 8:30 in the morning.
It's 8:30. And Ed, that means that you were coding until when? All right. First of all, I want to start by saying how humbled I am to be standing in front of you right now as your executive director and kicking off this incredible conference that we have lined up. As many of you know, I have been in this role for just over 90 days now. And so what I wanted to do was to begin by sharing 3 observations that I have in terms of my interactions with the community. It's been amazing in these 90 days to get to know so many of you. And the first thing that I have found, the first thing that I have noticed, is that you are a community with a vision, with a tremendous vision. And that vision is broad and to some extent it's a little bit complex. To begin with, what I have heard over and over again is that you have a vision of what must change. This vision of what must change resonated very well with me. I spent 7.5 years trying to make virtual machines be the dominant way of delivering compute, because I believed that for us to be able to get the innovation that we need in IT, we needed greater automation. And I thought that virtualizing compute would get us there. Unfortunately, what I found in meeting with end user after end user was that it wasn't enough simply to virtualize compute. In fact, the thing that I heard over and over again was that networking and networks were the thing standing between us and the ability to automate the entire data center and the entire IT infrastructure. And so it was welcome for me when I heard from so many of you that you had a vision that not only should networks change, but a vision of how those networks should change. What I heard from so many of you was that you believe that networks today are far too brittle, that networks are not agile enough, that they are hard to manage and hard to set up. And as a result, the costs of deploying a new service are far too high. What's interesting, of course, is that there's a solution that almost everybody in this room, and frankly, so many outside of this room, all agree on. Software-defined networking and NFV represent a solution. And so the question is, why is it that adoption has lagged behind everybody's expectations? Often in many industries, what you have is you have a set of people who all act based on their own motivations. And in this case, we've seen exactly that. We've seen over 30 SDN controllers out there. And it's not surprising that we see a dual reaction from end users. It's not surprising that we see end users on one hand very excited about SDN and NFV, but on the other hand, holding off making major investments. Because the siloed nature of our investment in this industry thus far means that end users are faced with a major adoption challenge. And so it's refreshing to see that I think for the first time in the history of this industry, competing companies, individuals with different views, are coming together and acknowledging that we need one platform. We need one common platform that is interoperable. What I've heard clearly from you is that this room is full of passionate people, passionate about bringing network programmability, passionate about bringing some degree of centralization to the management of networks. And I, for one, believe that you can get there. I think the other piece is a view that SDN and NFV, while two different concepts, are inherently linked. and they are linked by their purpose. If we truly want to get to automation, it is clear that we need to have some degree of separation between the control plane and the data plane. But we also do need the virtualization of network services. It is the combination of those two that will get us to automation. Now, I've talked a lot about agreement. I don't want to paper over the fact that there is great disagreement also in this industry. We don't all agree on how it's going to happen, and as I will talk about in a second, I think that that is a strength rather than a weakness. And so on that, I want to get to my second observation about this community. This community is diverse. It is passionate, but it is a meritocracy. Let's talk about diversity for a second. The OpenDaylight community has individuals from a whole range of countries, from almost all over the world. You come from companies that are large. In fact, the largest companies in the networking industry are represented in the OpenDaylight community. But you're not just large companies. There are a number of you that come from some of the smallest companies, and it's amazing to see the startups and the energy that the startups are starting to bring into the project. Something else I think that is amazing is this passion. Many doubters said, there is no way this could work. As I was doing my due diligence on taking this job, I can tell you I ran into just as many people who said you should not do this as people who said you should. And one of the big things that I heard was, this can't work. Too many different technologies, too many different players. Do you realize your board is going to be made up of companies who compete against each other, who want each other to fail? Clearly, this project is doomed. Actually, it's not. Here's what we've seen. We've seen tremendous debates. How do you differ in your views? How don't you? Let me describe a few of the debates that I have already heard from you. Number one of the quintessential debates that we're seeing right now in the industry is the degree to which we should centralize management and programmability. Some of you in this room believe that the key to achieving true SDN and true automation is for us to centralize as much as possible. Bring all of the intelligence in one place. The switches, the routers, the gear on the back end should just be executing, no thinking involved. Others of you think this is crazy. To be able to meet the needs of service providers and the largest enterprises. We have a number of you in this room who have been working hard for 20 years on how to design hardware to be able to meet those performance requirements. And so, those of you who have this, you have come to a very different conclusion. Yes, we need some degree of centralization, but frankly, we need high-end, intelligent gear on the back end that only gets infrequent instructions from the controller. Who's right? I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I think it's an awesome debate to be having. But it's not the only debate that we're having in this community. Another debate is around multi-tenancy. Those of you who've worked closely with service providers naturally get the need to be able to isolate users in an environment. And therefore, there are a number of the smartest thinkers in this room who have been working on how do I isolate users in an environment. Others have been focused primarily on the traditional data center management and think multi-tenancy is really an edge use case. Who's right? Who knows? There are obviously wars around protocols. There are folks in this room who believe that OpenFlow will solve every problem in the world today. Others who think that existing protocols really solve problems quite well. Some folks think we will have an evolution in protocols. Others believe that we will have many. And so now I ask you to think about that. There are certainly individuals, hopefully not in this room, but there are plenty of individuals out in the industry who think that a community cannot work if you have differing opinions. That people will simply argue with each other and nothing will get done. What is interesting, and I put up this last word here very consciously, This group has found a mechanism for overcoming that. When I first joined the project, I heard a gentleman here in the front named Ed Warnicki mention something that has really stuck with me. He said, if you want to understand our community, understand that code is the coin of the realm. And so, yes, we have debates, and I've heard them. Sometimes it feels like they're rat holes. Yet at the end of the day, the answer always seems to be the same, which is, do you have code? Bring code to the table. The way you win arguments in this community is by writing better code. Another interesting part of this meritocracy is that there is an understanding by the leadership, by the technical leadership, that we are in a brainstorm mode in our industry. As an industry, we see problems and we're trying out many different solutions. And like any brainstorming exercise, the worst thing that you can do is start editing and shooting down people's ideas. If you want ideas, put them all up on the board. This is exactly what the TSC has been doing, thanks to Dave Meyer's steady hand. The TSC has encouraged contribution, has encouraged different projects, even when the projects, to some extent, are trying to solve similar problems in different ways. Now, some of us really feel uncomfortable when there's overlap. But I strongly believe that this diversity of ideas, this diversity of projects is, in fact, our greatest strength. And it is what also pushes us to innovate and create things that were never seen before. The service abstraction layer at the heart of OpenDaylight, it is a testament to this view that we are not able, and we shouldn't pick one approach day one. That we have to understand that end users will have a range of technologies, will use a range of protocols, and the commitment of our community, of our industry, to meeting end users where they are and helping them transition to the future that they want in the speed that they want. This diversity is a strength of our community. Which brings me to the last major observation I wanted to share with you. And that is that this community is collaborative. I cannot understate how powerfully this has hit me over the last 90 days. Some of the best stories that I have been hearing are about examples of selfless collaboration. Let me tell you a story. There was an administrator a few months ago, a network administrator working for a university, who looked at the project and went, this is neat, but gosh, I wish OpenDaylight supported OVS, Open vSwitch. And so he contacted a member of our community and gave that input and feedback. And the member of the community said, hey, that's great. I'm not sure I know anybody who's willing to step up and do this. Why don't you do it? Wait a second, I'm an admin, I have a day job, I don't code, I don't know Java. Don't worry about it, said the developer. If you're willing to take the time to learn Java, whatever time you have in your evenings, I'll make sure to help you. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, that same exact day, that developer was holding the admin by the hand, helping him with every little question as he was a newbie. What's interesting is, there are two sides to this story. The developer was willing to help someone out who he'd never met before, for really no reason other than care for the project. And that man, that admin's life, changed forever. He is now a major developer on the project, and he's paying that forward. I have heard from so many others how this individual is the first to lend a hand to others. His career changed. This went from his night job to now his day job as of January 1st. Let me tell you another story. I was asked a few months ago to help judge a hackathon on a Saturday, and I thought, yeah, I could probably give a couple hours. And I reached out to a key developer, someone who has no free time, And I said, would you mind, I'm new in this job, would you mind coming and helping me for a couple hours? I just want to make sure that we've got somebody who's very, very familiar with the code. Next thing I know, this individual is getting up on a Saturday morning, spending his entire Saturday to handhold a set of newbies, because he realized that it can be daunting to learn all about all the elements of our project. Didn't ask for any recognition, just offered to do it because he cared about the project. These stories come from people regardless of where they are in the organization, this is not one class of developer who really believes in it. The last story I want to tell you is from an individual who is both on our TSC and on our board of directors. One night I get a call from a developer saying, we've got a decision to make. There's a project that may not be meeting its deadlines and may not be able to make the release. What should we do? Well, we had a conversation about it, and the next morning I checked in to see what had happened. And he told me this story. This TSC and board member stayed up late to help a woman in Taiwan who he had never met, who worked for a different company, and in fact, to help her on a technology that he was not an expert on, but he knew enough to help her. And he stayed up all night. Why? Because he just wanted to make sure that her project didn't miss the release. Because that would be a major disappointment. It would have been easy to say, fine, you know what, you didn't meet deadlines, it'll show up in the next release. What I have seen over and over again is that to a man, people care. People care about the end result, people care about the release, and people care about each other. As I said, there are many, many more stories. I just picked 3 that impacted me personally. If you have a chance, Ed Warnicki over here has a session tomorrow where he's going to be going through many of these road stories, and he's going to be going through them in a lot more detail than I just did. I also want to point out that it is not just about individuals. This collaboration is also about organizations. A question a lot of people ask about open source is, how are you going to get the difficult things done? I can totally see why a company would propose a project, propose a connector into the technology that they can sell. But who's going to step up to do the dirty work? Who's going to step up to do the blocking and tackling that no one wants to do within a proprietary software company? And the answer is people do. When you're committed to a project, you find the best way of contributing. And I'll use Ericsson as a great example of this. Some of you may have heard today they announced a wonderful donation to the community. They have stood up a lab here in the Bay Area that is going to be an OpenDaylight testing lab for all of you. You can all reserve time on this lab to be able to test your solution, your hardware, your software. This is on top of a lot of the hard work that Luis at Ericsson has done to make sure that this release is tested and is going out. There are a number of other examples of this. This was the key one that I wanted to touch on. And so to wrap up this section, what I wanted to make sure to share with you is how amazed I have been moving from a proprietary software company that had gotten so far larger than it was when I joined. I hadn't gotten so used to people thinking about my job, my product, maybe my company. But everything was about themselves. And what I've seen here is a group of people with a clear vision who are passionate, willing to argue, but yet are always willing to step outside of themselves to help each other. I think if this continues, and I have no reason to believe that it won't, we're in for even greater things. And on that note, I have an exciting announcement for you. As of this morning, we have hit a key milestone. Over the last 10 months, lots of people have been working incredibly hard. We have almost 5,000 commits. Over 150 people have contributed code, and we're now over 1 million lines of code. But all of this has come together with the hydrogen release. As of this morning, hydrogen is now live on the web for anybody to download. Do not underestimate this effort, but also what it means for the industry. This is truly a watershed moment for us. We now, for the first time, have a fully featured SDN controller that can serve as a platform for the industry, whose impact is not just on end users, but also on the broad community of developers that we have in this industry. I want to take a few moments to talk about how different folks will be leveraging hydrogen. And the best way to do that is, in fact, to start by talking about how folks have already leveraged the pre-hydrogen code. Rather than tell you what I expect will happen over the next 3, 6, 9 months, I want to tell you a few stories of things that have happened in the last 3 months. One of the key use cases that we will see this year with hydrogen is that hydrogen is going to unlock for end users the ability to educate, evaluate, and POC SDN. What I have heard over and over again from end users in this space is that they are still learning about SDN. CIOs are coming back from conferences and saying to their lead architects, "What's our SDN strategy?" Some of them have a great answer, most of them don't. I've heard in a large telecom company that the CIO instructed all of the different administrators and engineers and said, every single one of you needs to become an expert in SDN and NFV. How do they do that? How do you POC SDN? How do you educate each other? What we've seen thus far is really two extremes. Some people have picked up academic controllers that are very narrow in functionality as a way to try and demonstrate. And others have gone out and looked to evaluate entire complete solutions from vendors. That's a big challenge. Now, for the first time, we have code that can help easily facilitate education, evaluation, and POCs. Let me give you an example of someone who's done that. There is a researcher named Srini Sitaram at Deutsche Telekom. Srini has been wanting, out of personal conviction, to help spread the word about SDN. And so he was looking to create tutorials. He went ahead and picked up pre-hydrogen code and created a set of tutorials that are freely available on his website. He also took it on himself to seek to bring new people into our community and organized a hackathon, which I had the pleasure of judging a couple months ago. You see here a picture of this hackathon. And his comment to me at the end of this was, you know, we're early. I'm not going to lie to you and say this is easy to pick up and learn on, but it has all of the elements. It is unique. There is nothing like OpenDaylight out in the market. And so I'm excited to get in on the ground floor of this because I think that the impact on the industry is going to be huge. Let me give you another example. Last week, I was in Milan at Cisco Live. And I had the great good fortune to talk with a set of folks from Italtel. Italtel has taken code from OpenDaylight and built a POC of how a system can automatically see congestion on their network and reroute traffic via different cities to be able to overcome that using the OpenFlow protocol and built around the OpenDaylight controller. Again, Italtel found that there was nothing else out there in the industry where they could so easily, so quickly demonstrate the concepts that they wanted to. But the one I'm probably most excited about is CableLabs. A couple weeks ago, I had the great pleasure to go meet the folks from CableLabs. Now, the cable industry, like many industries, sees the promise of SDN. Like many folks, managing networks in a holistic way is a major challenge for cable operators, but they have a specific challenge that almost nobody else has. They have end devices in places they don't have great access. Right? Cable modems are in all of our homes. And so that entire industry is looking for a way to be able to have centralized management end-to-end from the cable modem all the way to all of the back-end systems. But unfortunately, no controller on the market supports the proprietary protocols that they have in the cable industry. So one option is they can go ahead and try and upgrade every single cable modem out in the country. Or they could do a software upgrade, or they could do a rip and replace. 5-year transition, 10-year transition. Instead, an individual looked at OpenDaylight and thought, I wonder if I could use OpenDaylight to do that. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second, OpenDaylight doesn't support any cable protocols. Well, this individual, his name is Tom, in a matter of weeks went through, looked at it and said, our protocol isn't that different from OpenFlow. He built his own plugin. Took him just a matter of weeks. Reached out to a couple developers, and as I talked about, this is a collaborative community. People picked up the phone and said, sure, of course I'll help you. Yes, I've got a release to get out, but I can find some extra time between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And the net result is they went to an industry trade show and showed the cable operators and said, you don't have to wait 5 or 10 years. Here I have a POC of a cable network which is managed end-to-end. And the heart of it, by the way, is OpenDaylight. And you know what the reaction was of the cable operators? Holy smokes. Can we talk more? We'd like to improve this. And as any great community, what happened next? Tom came to us and said, hey, I'd love to contribute this as a project. And you can see this is a project that is under consideration by the Technical Steering Committee already. This is just the tip of the iceberg. From an end user perspective, we today have something which is going to change the way that people evaluate and educate themselves on SDN. Do I expect we're going to get a whole bunch of people immediately deploying hydrogen in production? Probably not. But you know what? We don't need that right now to have a huge impact, because the industry is still grappling with how to architect their networks for the future. And so what we have is already going to have an impact. It's not just about end users today, however. Part of building a common platform is enabling innovation in the industry. We already have a number of different players that have shared with me, some privately, some publicly, as you see on this slide, their plans to use the OpenDaylight code to build complete solutions around it. Cisco last week at Cisco Live announced and unveiled a new technology, something called the APIC Enterprise Module, which is based on OpenDaylight code. IBM today announced a product of theirs. Excuse me, I've got to look up what it is exactly called. It's a unified controller solution based on OpenDaylight. Announced today, as I said. Now, you may be asking yourself, I've gotten this question a lot, how are people going to consume OpenDaylight? Is this going to be like Hadoop, where I look for a distribution and that's what I install? The answer is yes. In fact, InnoSeeb announced this week that they have a distribution of OpenDaylight. I have been told privately that I know that at least 2 other companies are working on their own distributions of OpenDaylight. That's wonderful. But that's not the only way that people will consume OpenDaylight. Like the University of Kentucky, people will pick up OpenDaylight code and just deploy it in their environment. A third model, and I think it may end up being the largest of all models, are people taking the code and embedding it, in a sense, OEMing it into their solutions. In some cases, OpenDaylight code will be 20% of the solution. In other cases, it might be 80% of the solution. Privately, a number of companies have said that their goal, and I put this as a challenge to those of you who are developers in our community, that their goal is to replace their proprietary controllers with the OpenDaylight controller. By doing this, they will be able to immediately inherit a degree of interoperability that they would not be able to have by themselves, to lower their costs of maintenance, of coming out with new releases, and most importantly, to focus resources on innovation, on being able to add value beyond the Common Core, where frankly everybody's inventing and reinventing the wheel over and over again. What I hear over and over again is, this is a great start. What I'm waiting for is to see how this evolves, because it is in my interest, it is in our interest to do this migration from our proprietary software over to the OpenDaylight controller as our core. I also have Radware on the slide. And I want to point out, again, that the innovation in this project is coming from companies large and small. Radware is a great example of someone who sees the vision of where OpenDaylight can go and has chosen to invest significant resources, even though they're not that large a company. Many of you know them for their contributions of Defense for All, the distributed denial of service functionality. Well, today, they announced that they're making 2 more contributions to the community. They're contributing traffic redirection as well as stats management capabilities. As I said earlier, we are in a period of brainstorming. There are so many great technologies out there, and it's fantastic to see the community coming together and saying, here's what we can offer. I'm willing to give something my developers spent a lot of time working on for the good of the community. It's not just about taking, it's about giving back. And I really encourage that. So with that, I want to recognize some individuals. To start with, I want to recognize our platinum and gold sponsors, without whom this wouldn't be possible. So please join me in thanking Ericsson, IBM, Microsoft, Cisco, Intel, and Midakura. I would also like to invite OpenDaylight's board of directors to please stand up so that you can all see and recognize them. As Jim Zemlin, who will speak after me, often says, open source projects live and die by governance. Meritocracies don't just happen. They come from good governance. And this project has some of the best governance out there. Now, I would be remiss to sit down without recognizing the hard work of the developers. Before I announce the most valuable developer, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who has contributed to making hydrogen a reality. I know there have been a lot of late nights. I know that this has been a valiant effort for a lot of folks. And this has not gone unnoticed. It hasn't gone unnoticed by your organizations. It hasn't gone unnoticed by the greater community. As part of that, you should have all received a coin of the realm, or if you haven't, you will soon receive a coin of the realm. This is to recognize, this is a token to recognize that you have contributed your ideas via your code. It was also brought up to me that there are some individuals who have almost willed this release to happen. And so, as you know, we went out and we did a poll to see who would be our MVP. The one thing we know is it's not Peyton Manning. Apologies to all the Broncos fans out there. What was interesting as I looked at the results of the vote is there were 2 individuals who rose up from the pack. 2 individuals who nearly unanimously everybody felt were really critical to the success of the project. And so it was a very, very close vote. I would like to recognize each of those individuals. So first, I would like to recognize the runner-up. This individual is one of the most passionate individuals in the project. As he has told me himself, this is his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. But net-net, people have very much appreciated all of his hard work. And so I have here a plaque, and this individual will also be receiving a $500 Amazon gift card. And I'd like to invite Ed Warneke to come up on stage. Thank you. Congratulations. This next individual, I wonder if you can figure out who he is, who they are. This individual was one of the earliest developers on the project. They're passionate, yet quiet. They're someone with tremendous commitment to the project, with tremendous skills, who is respected very much, yet is always willing to do the small things. This individual is always willing to reach out their hand to help other people. Someone has described him as quietly passionate. And so without further ado, I have a plaque and a $1,000 Amazon gift card to present to Madhu Venugopal. There he is. I will give you a hand up. There's the collaboration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you, man.
Once again, as I am sure Madhu will tell you himself, though, this has very much been a team effort. And so on that, one thing that I want to ask each and every one of you is to think about an individual that you have respect for, who is not currently working on OpenDaylight. If each of you can just simply recruit one additional person to work on this project, we will be up over 300 contributors a year from today. I'd love you to bring in more than one, but that's the challenge that I ask you. And if I meet you in a few months, I will ask you this question: have you been able to recruit somebody else to work on this project?